Welcome to The Nature of Your Nature. Come home to You Know More with Dr. Valerie Simonson on KAKU 88.5 FM, the voice of Maui, broadcasting from Akaku Maui Community Media Center in downtown Kahului. Aloha, everyone. Welcome to our premiere show, The Nature of Your Nature. And I'd like to just start off really with a big welcoming to one of my favorite people in the world, Harriet Witt.
Thank you.
We've known each other a long time, Harriet.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the nature of your nature, sometimes we go for walks and we just talk for hours with your background in science as well as just practical earth-based medicine or living. And I love what you say about yourself. You thrive in the place where leading-edge science meets ancient wisdom. It's so beautiful. And you have gotten international awards as a science writer, taught the celestial navigation to the crew of the Hokulea voyaging canoe in preparation for Rapa Nui. My gosh, that must have been amazing for you. And astronomer at the Maui Film Festival for 19 years, as well as taught astronomy at the Maui Community College, and I think that's where we first met and you did that for 19 years. That's amazing, Harriet, so thank you. And you have your own little thing going on still in these days. Would you like to share your website really quick, and then we'll come back to it again?
Sure. My website is passengerplanet.com. Passenger, Passenger, planet.com, because we're passengers on this planet.
I love that. And I love what you're saying about we are passengers on this planet. And we have a connection to the planet, although it's been kind of tough the last couple years, right? With some disconnections. We've had the fire and a number of fires, but it's kind of cracked people open a little bit. It's like that fire burst forth and we're seeing people come alive in themselves that they've maybe never seen. What's your experience with that?
Yes, I think you're right. We're finding something in ourselves that we didn't know was there before because we didn't need to look for it before. But we're looking now because we have to. Yeah. And it's definitely related to the expression that you keep using, which is you know more. And as I've been pondering that, I've realized what I wrote in the little note to you earlier today, that, you knowing more isn't about a score on an IQ test. And me knowing more isn't about a score on an IQ test. Also, me knowing more isn't about me being smarter than anybody else. It feels like it's about having access to a greater than human intelligence, or the greater than human intelligence, that all of us benefit from thanks to the miracle molecule that we call DNA. When I say DNA, I see you nodding, but I'm not sure what that means.
Oh, it means yes. We're opening it up into another avenue, but I want to hear more before I jump into that and the banana tree.
Well, the DNA, when I say the word DNA, I realize a lot of times people think I'm using that we can't access our DNA unless we have medical knowledge, unless we, wear white lab coats and we work in laboratories and stuff. But actually, we can access our DNA by just touching our belly button or remembering that we have a belly button. Because the belly button, formally called umbilicus, is what's left of the umbilical stem that you ripened on the end of when you were inside your mother's womb. And through that umbilical stem, you received all the nutrients and the oxygen and everything that you needed from your mom. And also you used that umbilical stem to deliver to your mom all the waste products that you didn't yet know how to dispose of. And through that umbilical stem, you received the DNA the miracle molecule that has this awesome intelligence, because DNA is the language and the library of our planet's 4 billion year experiment with life. Almost 4 billion years. Nobody can say for sure. Somewhere between 3.5 and 4 billion years. So our planet has been experimenting with life for, let's say, 4 billion years, because it's a faster thing to say. And she's learned so much from 4 billion years of experimentation. Compare that to Western science, which is amazing, but that's only 300 years of, So the intelligence that came to us through our DNA, came to all of us through our DNA, is intelligence acquired from 4 billion years of experimentation. That's awesome. And so that's what comes to me when I think about this more than, you are more than, all of us are more than, because we do have access to this intelligence in our DNA. We don't yet quite have the language for talking about the access, and that's what I love exploring with you, is we're finding language for what is this greater than human intelligence that we all have access to, but we don't quite have the vocabulary for. But we know from genetics, everybody's inherited the DNA. We all have it. If we didn't have it, we wouldn't have bodies, So, that's what I'm excited about exploring with you, is just developing the language for describing this greater than human intelligence that all of us acquired through our DNA and may not be fully conscious of because we don't yet have words. Words are like the containers into which we pour our thoughts. So it's like we need to develop, you and I have been kind of, when we go for walks, we develop word containers that we can pour our thoughts into. So that's what I'm excited about doing here today.
Thank you. When you were talking about the DNA, I think it was a day, maybe 2 weeks into the fires over on the west side, and I saw it was devastated. It was just black and gray, right? But one day I saw a tiny, tiny piece of green. I'm like, wow, what is that? And then the next day it was a little bigger and a little bigger, and then they built these walls so you couldn't see. They were, to hide everything and to keep the dust down. Right. But one day I was driving over into Honokawai Park, and there was a banana tree that had come over the top of this wall that they had created, bearing fruit. Oh my gosh. And it took me back to when I studied genetics. Oh. A banana has 65% the same genes as a human does. Right? And it really shifted my whole perspective of this major crises, because I'm working over there on the west side. What I saw were people found something within themselves, and they had major transformations. Not everybody, but a lot of them that I got to serve, right. They had major transformations, and their life, of course, wasn't the same as it was before, but they really know why they're here now. Oh, interesting. And they've had to leave perhaps their profession that they had before, but they're just like that banana tree. They rose from the ashes, this phoenix rising, right? And now as the dust is settling around us within ourselves, we still are in this process of transformation. Yes. Yes, I love what you're saying about the banana tree. Thank you so much, because it's reminding me of one of the things that has given me a lot of strength, and that is the fact that more than 98% of our DNA is prehuman. And most people, when they think about prehuman DNA, think about chimpanzees and other primates, and because we don't hear about anything earlier than that. But the facts are out there that we have plant ancestors too.
And that's more exciting to me almost than our animal ancestry, because plants transform light into life. And you saw that in the little green weed that pushed up through the crack in the sidewalk there in Lahaina. And you saw it also in the banana plant. Somehow plants can transform light into life.
Well, and when we go back to what we've talked about prior on some of our walks, we've talked about photosynthesis, right?
Right.
And we do in our human bodies now, our active photosynthesis action is vitamin D, right? You got to have sun to get vitamin D. But you give me a really great perspective that there was probably more.
Well, I'm thinking there's a lot more just because of what I've read about our prehuman DNA. I've just become quite obsessed with our prehuman DNA. Maybe because I'm kind of disappointed with humans. Not sure, but I somehow have become obsessed with. Actually, I can remember. I can remember the first person who ever told me that more than 98% of our DNA is prehuman. And it was back in the 1970s. It was a biologist who I was working with when I was teaching in an environmental education center on the mainland. And he just mentioned it spontaneously over lunch. And I can still remember my entire body. Whoa! Wow. It was more than a piece of information. I could feel something in my body. I was like, thank you, Pete Conroy, wherever you are. I could feel something in my body. Woke up like, whoa! The more than 98% of me that had kind of been inaccessible to me started to become accessible. Wow. And as a human, during this time when all of us humans are desperately in need of all the help we can possibly find, I feel like there's a lot of help in that prehuman DNA, particularly the plant DNA. And I'm thinking of the very first plant, which is blue-green algae. Have we talked about that before?
No, we haven't.
Okay, because blue-green algae invented photosynthesis. How blue-green algae invented photosynthesis, I don't know, but that was a huge turning point. That was kind of the beginning of life on the surface of the Earth. There was already some life down there in the stuff, chemicals coming out of the bottom of the ocean that some creatures down there are living off of. But there was no life. For the Earth's first 1.5 billion years, for the Earth's first 1.5 billion orbits, the sun was shining on the Earth, but it was not in any relationship with the Earth. Then 3.5 billion years ago, this being who we call blue-green algae invents a light receptor, takes the light into her body, and uses it to make more of her body. And that's what scientists call photosynthesis. At that point, and then blue-green algae becomes really successful. I mean, unbelievably successful. Okay, and so at that point, the sun is not just shining on the Earth, it's in a relationship with the Earth. And that relationship is what we call life on Earth. And it's been going now for approximately 3.5–4 billion years. But it's all thanks to this blue-green algae. And blue-green algae has no brain. But it had the intelligence, it had the intelligence to transform light into life. The banana tree is still doing that. The little green weed in the cement is still doing that. Yeah.
Right.
With no brain. Yeah. And that feels, it's corny, but it's food for thought, no?
For sure, for sure. I'd like to go back just a few years ago. I was working with someone, and when they had a dissociative disorder, and when they would dissociate, the way that they would return back to the present was to be in nature. Go touch a rock or a plant or something like that. Right. And one day somebody had cut down all of my holoconia plants in my yard. And I was devastated. I didn't know you were supposed to cut those down once in a while, but anyway, this client, they dissociated, and I got them outside, and they crawled over and picked up a heliconia plant and stuck it in my face and said, "The difference between you and this plant, Dr. Valerie, is that this plant knows God."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. That's the pause that I took. That's when you know that you're speaking to some of the wisest beings on this planet. And that plant would bring that person back home to their innate wisdom.
So he could come back and reconnect with his body then?
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And right now, blue-green algae is really getting popular. It's been around for a long time, as a nutrient.
Right.
But I'm working a lot with cancer patients, and it is phenomenal to see what's happening
What happens?
with people when they're taking this blue-green algae, blue spirulina, and these nutrients that have been here for thousands and thousands of years, maybe millions of years, and their body is remembering how to be.
Oh, it's remembering. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No, thank you. That's remembering. Okay, because I realize that's a good word for what I experienced back in the 1970s when the biologist Pete Conroy told me that 98% of our DNA is prehuman. It was like, it's like I remembered a huge part of a huge something that had been forgotten, or maybe I should say had been kind of paved over by, paved over by, paved over is as far as I can go right now.
Yeah, and we can go into that whole thing, whether it was society, was it family, whatever, things get paved over and we lose that connection, right, to ourselves. And, I've delivered a lot of babies in my career, and I don't know that I've ever had one that didn't come out fully aware. Scientifically, they can't see you, they can't communicate, but they do. They did and they do. Right. But as we go through our maturation, get into schools, and the school tells us this is the way you need to think, and takes us further and further away from nature in its basic elements. And we've talked about this is, we're taught this is a square instead of looking at a plant and seeing the different dimensions in the plant, right? Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Right. Well, the square is a Euclidean shape, and Euclid's geometry is the geometry that shaped Western thinking for 2,500 years. And Euclid was brilliant. I'm not knocking Euclid at all. But his geometry is the geometry of squares and parallelograms and things like that. And quite recently, a fellow by the name of Benoit Mandelbrot discovered or remembered that that's not the geometry of nature. But all the time that Euclid's geometry dominated our thinking, and dominated our thinking to the point where Euclid's geometry books sold more copies than any other book except the Bible until the 20th century. Okay, so really shaped our thinking.
That's a lot of books.
Yeah, it's a lot of books. And anyway, so Mandelbrot, the fellow who remembered or discovered, whatever you want to say, nature's geometry, fractal geometry, Mandelbrot is famous for saying clouds are not spheres, mountains are not cones, coastlines are not smooth, and lightning doesn't travel in a straight line. The reason he said that is because up until Mandelbrot, who just passed away a few years ago, Western scientists thought that nature's shapes were crude approximations of Euclid's geometry. So, a pine tree is a crude approximation of a cone. A cloud was a crude approximation of a circle, of a sphere. Lightning was a tree bark was a crude approximation of a straight line. Yeah. So if Western thinking was able to believe for 2,500 years that nature shapes are crude approximations of Euclid's shapes, that says something about the paving job.
Yeah. That's some paving job with some pretty deep concrete. Right?
Yeah, but weeds can push up through cracks in the pavement. That's the thing. And that's what you saw, that little green weed. I love that you mentioned that in Lahaina, because we've all seen that. And I know, I can't think of his name, but there was a fellow who survived the concentration camps in Germany, wrote a beautiful book, and he said that what kept him alive during that time in the concentration camp was every once in a while he would see a little weed push up through a crack in the pavement, and it kept him going. And amazing. You mentioned that same little weed. And it's interesting that weeds can crack pavement. You don't see rose bushes cracking pavement.
Right.
It's not the cultivated plants, it's the wild. Because the weeds are still wild, right? There was no cultivation of plants for billions of years until humans came along. And then when humans came along, they saw these amazing thing called seeds, and they picked them up, and but what grows from that isn't a weed anymore. It's cultivated.
Right.
But a weed is still wild, and weeds can crack pavements. You don't see pansies cracking pavements. Yeah?
Dandelions.
The wild stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, because those seeds just blow wherever they blow. Yeah. Anyway, more power to weeds.
More power to weeds. Papa Ka'alakea said there's no such thing as a weed. They're all medicine.
Oh, okay. Yes,
Yeah,
and that's why they're
right?
medicine.
Yeah.
That's precisely why they're medicine.
Right.
They have that strength. Yes. And speaking of medicine, do you know the RX?
Oh, thanks. I was going to ask about that. Tell us about that. You know, when you get a script and it has the RX on there, go for it.
Well, I discovered this when I was preparing a talk for the Farmers Union. Thank God for the Farmers Union. I love the Farmers Union. But anyway, the RX on a pharmacy comes from the Greek or the Latin word radix, which means root, because our original medicines were plant roots. And the roots had to be ground with a mortar and pestle to be prepared. You can't just chomp on a root. The roots have to be ground in a very intelligent way in the mortar and pestle to prepare the medicine so that it's effective and bioavailable. But also what's interesting about that is that the reason we humans are able to utilize the plants as medicine and food and immune supplement, the reason we're able to utilize those plants is that we have receptors in our body. And those receptors are there because we used to be plants. So the fact that we used to be plants is why we have receptors for stuff like marijuana, but also many other substances that are less famous, but very important as far as our health and our immunity. Mm-hmm. So when we realize that we have receptors for the plant medicines because we used to be plants, and we realize that the RX on the pharmacy stands for root, we go back to the root of being well, which traces right back to our plant ancestry again.
It does.
Not to deny our animal ancestry, but right now I'm obsessed with plants.
Hey, I love that, right? And I remember during COVID, it was a very challenging time. And actually that's how I started the nonprofit who is sponsoring us today, the nonprofit kNOW More. And Harriet's been one of our most esteemed presenters for our restorative programs that we offer. And we are serving healthcare providers, first responders, educators, and community leaders with restorative care. And they are helping us out by sponsors for this show, The Nature of Your Nature, kNOW More, on KAKU 88.5. That's pretty amazing how this has all come together, right? And we're going all over the world, which is amazing that this information can get out so people can understand that they're okay. And we were sharing a story the other day about one of my people, they had a pretty serious diagnosis, but there's something inside of them that knows. And I always say that, you know more, right? But they really knew more. And no matter what the diagnosis has been, they look great, they feel great. I had one the other day surf 100 waves in a few days. And these are stage 4, I don't like the word that starts with a C, but they remembered who they were, who they are, and they come alive. They stand taller. They're moving through it.
Right.
They're connecting with Earth and the heavens. Their spiritual practice, whether the surfer it's the water or whatever. And speaking of water, we are 75% water.
Yes, we have the same amount of water in our bodies as the Earth has in her oceans. Well, we all started out in the ocean. Blue-green algae is a seaweed.
Right. Good point.
It lives in the ocean, and if my memory serves me correctly, to this day, blue-green algae is still providing something like 40%, maybe more, of the oxygen that we breathe.
Oh, wow.
Well, because so much of the Earth's surface is water, and the blue-green algae is ocean, and blue-green algae lives in the ocean. And you just reminded me, when you were talking about the people who know more and are surfing when they should be prone.
Right.
Should be prone. It reminded me of something else that I came across once I realized that the knowing more isn't about a score. It's about access to the more than human intelligence that has benefited us through this miracle molecule that we call DNA. And we all received our DNA through the umbilical stem that connected us to our mom, the umbilical stem that we ripened on the end of. And so I got sort of fascinated about that whole umbilical stem connection, and I started Googling, and I came across something that, fascinating research. When you were in your mother's womb, you didn't start out with an umbilical stem. You started out just as a single-celled zygote, right? And that little zygote multiplied itself by dividing itself, which is kind of cool. It just kept dividing itself until it multiplied itself. And then it graduated and became what's called an embryo. And the embryo is full of stem cells, which are really exciting because we all know stem cells are shapeshifters. You know, a stem cell can become a skin cell, a bone cell, a liver cell. It can become also, amazing. So when we were embryos, we were just pulsing with possibility.
Wow.
And so I got curious to know more about the stem cells, and I came across research by a woman at Princeton by the name of Bonnie Bassler, amazing woman, Bassler. And okay, so when you're looking at these stem cells, here they have all this potential to become almost any kind of a cell. So the question is, well, how does the decision get made as to what kind of a cell is it going to become? Is it going to become a bone cell, a skin cell, what? Yeah, okay. So how that decision gets made is really interesting because there's no brain there, obviously. And the decision gets made because each individual cell signals to its neighbor using electrical signals or chemical messenger molecules. And as a result of all this signaling, that's this communication, they develop feedback loops. And as a result of the feedback loops, they form groups that are capable of doing stuff that a single cell could never do on its own. Okay, so they do the communication through the, it's called quorum sensing. That's what Bonnie Bassler discovered, Bonnie Bassler at Princeton discovered that these molecules that have no brains, clearly, that's way pre-brain, right, are signaling to one another and forming feedback loops. And as a result of the feedback loops, they develop these multicellular groupings that can do all sorts of things. And this process is called quorum sensing. They arrive at a quorum, and we all know what a quorum is. I mean, we've all participated in meetings. Okay, so this is called quorum sensing. As a result of their communication and the feedback loops, they do this quorum sensing, and that determines which genes get switched on and which genes remain silent. That determines which one ends up as a skin cell, which one ends up as a bone cell. But quorum sensing is revolutionizing biology because it's clearly very intelligent, and there's no brain necessary. And we in the West, at least the last 300 years, have assumed that you need a brain in order to have intelligence.
That's right. Yeah.
So Bonnie Bassler's work is really exciting.
That is.
And Bonnie Bassler herself is exciting. She is just, she's like a stem cell herself.
Wow. That's wonderful. You know, I go back to when I was in Bali many years ago with Robin Lim at Bumi Sahat, and I was seeing clients there, and there was a person that came in, had been paralyzed, massive stroke, 35 years old, 10 years paralyzed, couldn't swallow, couldn't talk, couldn't move. Her husband would feed, chew food, put it in her mouth.
Oh my gosh.
And get it to go down in the belly. So skin and bones, yeah. And I had him reach under her arms and kind of stretch out her body a little bit because stroke, it kind of gets all curled up, right? And I looked into her eyes and I saw a spark, tiny spark. I gave her a homeopathic for head injury, massive stroke, right? I gave her a homeopathic for overwhelm, which happened to be gold. And we know the power of gold in science, right, or metaphysics anyway. And then she came back every day, and we did all different kinds of treatments on her. And now this woman had not spoken 10 years, right? I was walking away from her cot one day, and she said, "Man, oh man, oh man." Now, evidently, that's what I would say because I was seeing sometimes up to 100 plus people a day in this little clinic. So I was on the move all the time, right? But when she spoke in the Balinese, they all are there. The family's all there with them when they come to the clinic, right? And we just all cried. It was so beautiful. And you know, it was only a few weeks more. That woman was walking.
Oh my gosh.
Full talking, laughing, and she had us all laughing. I didn't understand Balinese, but it was amazing transformation. So when I was getting ready to leave the country, there was someone that had been working with her for quite a while and said, "What did you do? What did you do?" And I said, "God, what did I do that was different than what you guys were doing, right?" What I did is I believed in her. I didn't believe in the diagnosis.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And there was that spark, that light.
Oh, you saw the spark.
I saw the spark in her eyes. Even though the brain didn't function, which goes back to what you were talking about.
Oh, the brain. I see the connection there. Interesting.
Yeah. It came back around, and she walked to the going away party that they had for me.
Oh,
she walked beside me, and she ate food with us.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And the next country I went in to, I was driving down the road, and I went, what was that she had that I didn't know about? I mean, how could she do that miraculous recovery, right? Wow. And what came was, you know more.
Oh.
She knew more
yes.
than all of us doctors, all of us people. She needed a little bit of help to remember that.
Just a little memory jog.
Yeah.
Wow.
And homeopathy is amazing, and the herbs were, and acupuncture, all the things that were being done for this.
But it all started with you seeing that spark.
It did.
Yeah.
And that changed my life, because then I quit looking at diagnoses and looked at the spark in the eye.
The spark. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, and when you're talking about the spark, what's coming to mind, I'm going back to those stem cells that are just, I'm going to say sparkling. I don't know that they sparkle, but yeah. And the idea, the outmoded idea that a brain is necessary for intelligence, because there's clearly intelligence there. If plants can transform light into life, and all the other things we just talked about. And what I'm realizing is we need a new word for this kind of intelligence that gave rise to brains. And I'm kind of wanting to call it primal intelligence, because it gave without the intelligence that's in the stem cells and in the quorum sensing, brains wouldn't have evolved into existence. So there's clearly a phenomenal intelligence at work here that doesn't require a brain, but we don't have a word for it. I mean, in our culture, we tend to say, when we say brainless, that means dumb. You know, all the things we've just talked about, the plants and the blue-green, they don't have brains, but to call them brainless is completely erroneous, or it conveys the wrong thing. So I'm thinking we need a new word. Like my placeholder word is just primal intelligence, because it means primo, first, original. Yeah. For a long time, I was just calling it brain-free intelligence in a kind of joking way, and I was waiting for some musician, hoping some musician would write a song celebrating brain-free intelligence. Well, because farmers, I was hoping, because I work with the farmers union so much, and a lot of those people are musicians, and I know that one good way to get a message out there is through music, through songs. And so I was, and the farmers work with brain-free intelligence all the time. I mean, they work with plants all the time. They know how intelligent the plants are. Right. They just work with that intelligence. They don't tell the plants what to do. They don't tell the plants they need to have brains.
Right.
You know. So I was hoping I could get one of the farmer musicians to write a song about brain-free intelligence. I haven't succeeded yet. They're still kind of shy.
Yeah.
They're a little bit shy about getting up in front of me.
They'll get there.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Maybe you.
Hey, or somebody else will show up and do it for us, right? Yeah, that innate intelligence.
Yes.
That innate knowingness. And as I teach what I need to learn, right? So I have a doctorate in naturopathic medicine, nutrition. It's probably one of my weakest areas is nutrition. So I'm still teaching nutrition.
Oh,
but now it's, especially since the fires, where there's been such this displacement of many of us within our bodies.
Right.
We call that PTSD or some of those other things.
Right.
It's all real. It's not made up. And to re-find ourselves, I don't know if that's a word even, it is, refine ourselves by returning to our roots. And the way that you return to your roots is to get in nature.
Yes.
I remember when I was in medical school, there was a Native American that came, and he taught a class. His uncle was Wallace Black Elk, and I'm blanking on his name right now, but he told us, go lean against a tree. Oh, you need to study more. You're having trouble in school. Go lean up against a tree. You'll get a better grade. And it worked. It worked. And when I was a kid, that's where I spent most of my life, was in a tree or in the plants, as a farmer, or not a farmer, a gardener, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the trees are our teachers.
They are.
For sure.
And the trees look like your lungs.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
And so much of the food that we have and plants, they look like different parts of the body. So they actually help us heal.
Yes.
Right?
Well, they help us to reconnect with our plant ancestry.
Yeah.
Yes. And every time we connect with that, which reminds me, what you just said there about that Native American fellow reminded me of another amazing thing about plants that I came across once I got obsessed with this. When somebody is in a coma, we say they're in a vegetative state, which implies that plants just stand there doing nothing all day. Very recently, scientists discover that plants are actually performing the fastest chemical reaction on the face of the earth. When a plant brings a light particle into its body and transforms that into its body, It does that in 15 femtoseconds.
Wow.
A femtosecond is a millionth of a billionth of a second.
That's really fast.
Okay, so a femtosecond is a millionth of a billionth of a second. A plant needs only 15 femtoseconds to transform light into life, which means that what plants are doing is so much faster than what we can perceive that we are comatose by comparison. Yeah. But they're still on the outside. This faster than speed of light stuff that they're doing on the it's on the inside, yeah? So it's kind of deceptive. It looks like they're just standing there doing nothing, but on the inside they're performing the fastest chemical reaction on the face of the earth.
Wow.
And that is kind of another way of, I don't know, it's another way of, help me out here.
Sometimes it's just no words.
Yes.
It's an experience that we get to have in our
Sometimes
bodies,
no words.
right?
Right, plants don't need words.
And it transports us to that place of what I'm going to call safety.
Yes.
Come home.
Yes.
Come home.
Yes.
The nature of your nature, as we come home to the nature of our nature, it's we're free from the concrete, the pavement, all of those things, and then we walk in a different way. We sing in a different way. We
Yes.
communicate in a different way. Relationships naturally change. A lot of relationships are just dissolving right now because they just don't work anymore. Right? And that's the beauty of this time, this great transformation that we're in. And coming back to the light of being the photosynthesis. I was somewhere the other day and they said, "Oh my God, you're just this light that comes into the room." And I went, "Okay, thanks." When we all really are the light, be that. And what has helped, especially helped, since I got back from the fires, getting my garden going again.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yes.
And the other day, everything's growing and it's looking really good. And actually, some of the stuff you gave me from the Farmers Union one time it almost died, but it's coming back.
Oh, good.
Yeah. But I noticed the other day when we had the rains in Haiku,
Yeah, nice rains recently.
the basil grew 3 inches
Oh, wow.
in 2 days.
Yeah.
The heavens, that rain from the heavens, which is different than coming from a hose.
Yes, they can tell the difference. They can absolutely tell the
And
difference.
so can we. Our processed food is coming from the hose.
Oh, that's an incredible metaphor. Wow.
Yeah.
No, I really see that because I have a rain catchment system, and I can see the difference between the plants that are being fed with the rain and the ones that are being fed from the hose. They can tell the difference. And I love your metaphor about the processed food.
Yeah.
It's coming out of a hose.
Yep. And right now, some people are concerned about this sustainability on Maui, and I'm not. Let's farm. Let's put food in the ground. And we've got people that are doing taro. We've got people that are doing the fishing, and then we go back to the way you've got taro. You know what?
Yes.
I have some basil. Maybe like a little basil with your taro or whatever it is. Right.
Right. Trade.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it makes for a healthier species.
Oh, much.
And, supplements have been great for the world, but supplements are man-made, majority of them.
Right.
So I remember when I made the decision years ago to go plants as much as possible
Right.
to help people get back to that natural essence of our being. And I'm not saying veganism or anything like that, because some people really prefer to have animal. But we've got a few more minutes here. Is there anything you'd like to say that you feel like's coming up for you and want to do a zinger on us? They're good at zingers. I have to go home and think
what's
for a long
coming
time.
up as you're talking about leaning against the tree and the plants is I'm remembering a dream that I had a few years ago. And I call it a dream because I don't have any other word for it. It just kind of went on all night long. Okay. And I was aware that there was a young man in the room and that the young man was just radiating compassion, more compassion than I've ever felt. And he was just kind of there on the other side of the room. And then all night long. And then as I woke up, I saw him. And he was sitting under a tree. And I understood, it was very clear that the tree was his teacher. And when I saw him, I realized, I remember that guy from art history class, because art history class in college was when I first saw Buddhist art. I didn't grow up in a culture where there were any Buddhists. And I always assumed from my Asian art classes in college that the Buddha sitting under the tree was sitting under the tree for the shade, because it's hot in India. But it was very clear as I woke up from the dream and I saw who had been this compassionate being who had been in the room all night. It was very clear that the tree was his teacher. Yeah. And so I was so stunned by this that I asked a Buddhist friend, what do you think of this? And the Buddhist friend said, well, we do know that the particular tree is called Ficus religiosa.
Wow.
Ficus religiosa photosynthesizes 24/7.
Wow.
There are no other trees that photosynthesize 24/7.
Huh.
So,
yeah, and when I've been in a place where I'm completely silent and I can watch the trees breathe, and it reminds me to breathe, right?
Mm-hmm. Teachers.
Yeah, they're the teachers.
And what they're exhaling is what you're inhaling.
Yeah. And I remember Papa Ka'alakea one time was telling a story about there was a minister from another island that they were driving around the island, and the minister's talking about his church, and it was quite fancy church. And Papa's driving down South Kihei Road, and he points to these trees that he had planted when he was young.
Oh.
And he said, "There's my church."
Ah.
and then he said, and he pointed to a rock. There's my church.
Oh.
Right? Isn't that beautiful?
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, and he watches his church grow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And give him oxygen to breathe.
Right.
Yeah, right.
And
Whoa.
science is catching up with nature, and it's pretty exciting to see
Yes,
that.
science is doing amazing stuff, but the science isn't making it into the textbooks.
Not yet.
That's why these podcasts are so important.
It is.
Because the news is getting out through, Bonnie Bassler, if you Google her,
Okay.
podcast,
Okay.
But it just hasn't made it into the textbooks yet.
Yeah. And, as long as we can remember within ourselves, if we just allow children to be children, and they touch the plant, they eat the plant, and wow, we could have, well, we do see it especially in Maui. Mm-hmm. These little kids are amazing. How are these keikis?
Yeah. The ones who are coming to Lakahea Farm. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Do you know about Lakahea Farm?
I do. Would you like to share a little more about
Winsome Williams is with Lakahea Farm, and she's made a lot of movies of the school children who've come to her farms.
Yeah.
And those children are so excited. They are learning so much from the plants.
Yeah.
If you just go on Instagram, you can see her videos. And Winsome is my tenant, so I feel very blessed to have her.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, everything you're saying about the children is just in all of her little movies, and they're all on Instagram.
So I'm going to go back to the hose for a moment. For parents that are out there listening, maybe think about, you want to put your kid drink out of a hose, or maybe do the plants, right? Let's get our food from the plants. Yes. And stay as local as possible. Mm-hmm. And that will take care of so many different issues on diabetes, for example. Rice and Spam, no, that's
right.
That isn't native at all. It doesn't grow here,
I see
right?
What you're saying. I see what you're saying.
So that's the hose, right?
I see what you're saying.
And so as we can return to nature, we return to our nature.
Yes.
Right?
Ain't no difference.
Ain't no difference. Yeah. So, Harriet, I would love to have you come back again sometime, and I'm so honored that you're here as being the premiere of our show, The Nature of Your Nature. Come home to You No More. And this will be the foundation of all of our shows. We have other experts that are coming in, very talented people too, that will be carrying on the theme of returning back to your nature. And next week, we're going to have Jessica Brazil. She's a licensed social worker, counselor, social worker from Kihei. And I met her over on the west side in the fires. And she was using a pan, what do they call that? Hand pan.
Oh.
Right? And there was a gentleman that I was really concerned about that no one was able to reach. And she just sat on the ground and played the hand pan. And I watched that guy inch toward her, and then he sat beside her for a good hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. And then the next day, he was fine. I mean, he could make eye contact. We had food and all of that stuff going on for them too. But it was amazing to see what Jessica was able to do. And when I was walking by her that day that I saw this happen, I didn't know her at all. She grabbed my hand and she says, "We're going to be working together someday." And I went, "Okay, whatever," and ran to the next patient, right, or the next client. And I'm so honored that I have these amazing people in my life that can take us into these different venues. But for today, I feel like what you've said today here on KAKU 88.5, the voice of Maui, is the foundation. It's the roots.
Thank you. Radix.
Radix, right.
It's the origin of the word radical. You can't be a real radical unless you've connected with your roots. That's what Carl Jung says. You have to connect with your roots to be truly radical. And
that's kind of a big topic right there, isn't it? Radical. And those fires did pop, in Yellowstone Park when the fire park burned back in the 80s. Everything was devastated. And what grew afterwards were ancient plants. That heat broke open those seeds that were deep down in the earth, and these ancient plants came back to life. Yeah.
Radix.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I think we're all kind of going through that now as we're recovering from the fires, right? And we're finding ourselves, we're changing our careers, and we're doing it.
Fascinating about those ancient plants being activated by the fires.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, because that's what Carl Jung was saying. If you can't be a true radical if you don't connect with your roots, because without that strong connection to the roots, you try to do something and you just fall over. So a real radical is connected to the roots. Anyway, yeah,
and
that's
the
beautiful.
roots are fed by nature, compost, not the hose,
right?
Which is the processed food. The things that are so easy to get and maybe more affordable, but definitely more accessible when we have these jobs that we're working such long hours and such.
Right. Wow, fascinating about the fire. I didn't know that. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's inspiring.
So I think if everybody can get their little gardens going again, and it helps the children, and the next generation will be healthier and healthier, and as we get educated, or maybe not educated, but make better choices with how to control weeds, permaculture, the other ways of doing things on the earth.
Great fertilizer if you pick them before they go to seed.
They are. Yeah. And that could put people out of business when we don't have the big C, which I don't like to say the word, but they say we don't have a cure for cancer. Well, prevention is the way. Let's clean up our food. Let's clean up the water. Let's clean up our thoughts. But you can't have clean thoughts if you're drinking from the hose, right?
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And there's a big movement with gut biome right now. It's getting really, really, really big, gut biome.
Yes.
Well, basically, just get back to nature.
And that's called the second brain very often.
Yeah, and the vagal nerve goes all the way through here, and then our mouth is the gateway to health. Chew your food.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Was there anything else that you'd like to share? We got it.
Well, I keep seeing that sign on the wall that says the tub. And I don't know why it's on the wall, because the light is so bright I can't read anything beneath it. But it reminds me that one of the wonderful ways to fertilize a garden is with worms. And there's certain, I think they're called red wiggler worms. And if you feed them regularly, their poop is amazing fertilizer.
Yeah.
And Winsome Williams, who has Lakahe Community Education Farm, got a free bathtub from the hardware store, because when bathtubs are shipped here, sometimes they crack on the way.
Oh.
And if you apparently it happens fairly often, bathtubs crack on the way, and the hardware stores can't sell a cracked bathtub. So she got a free one. This is a tiny crack on the top, and it's full of worms. And every day we feed the worms, and the worms are pooping, and the poop goes on the garden.
Oh my gosh!
And it's amazing. It's the most amazing, rich black soil you have ever seen, but it's growing in a in a bathtub.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
And that's all I can think to say, because I've been looking at that sign.
Well, poop is good, right?
Hooray for poop, yes.
Yay. Well, thank you, Harriet, and thank you, Akaku and KAKU 88.5 FM, and the nature of your nature. Come home to you no more. And it's true. Yep. Yes. Yes. You know more. Thanks for joining us today. A-hooey ho.
Seabury Hall is